I'm Sophie Hannah.
I'm Luanda Yasmin.
And I'm Anissa. Welcome to episode 27 of Ethnically Speaking, the show where we discuss everything affecting the UK's highly melanated communities, from current affairs to pop culture and everything in between. We always keep it 100, and this week we're talking all things Indian farmer protests, moving on from a job when it no longer serves you, space tourism, and remaking old movies. So Sophie, what's going on?
Well, I don't know if you ladies have seen what's going on in India, but footage of Indian farmers protesting against agricultural reforms has gone viral online, and the issue has even been brought up with Boris Johnson during Prime Minister's questions. Now, some 250 plus million agricultural workers have gone on a nationwide strike, and the ones who marched in the capital city of Delhi clashed badly with the police. Now, the Indian diaspora has been supporting the movement and taken to the streets worldwide, including in the United Kingdom. So London, Leicester, Birmingham, Northampton, all been a part of the protest, yet the story has just failed to be reported widely in the world media. And it made me think, like, with all the extensive coverage that came for the Black Lives Matter protest in the summer, why aren't we talking about what's going on in India more? And should we even care about what's going on with agricultural workers thousands of miles away? And what support can we offer?
As usual, I just need to take it one question at a time. I think it's natural to have more knowledge on things that impact your personal life, but I think the mentality that we should only care about things if they directly affect us is probably one of the reasons why so many things take so long to fix. We should care about other people's issues because we shouldn't be comfortable with the mistreatment of human beings, and in my opinion, any living being on any scale. So it's interesting that you mentioned Black Lives Matter because, you know, obviously most of the Black community were already aware that the issues that are being brought up through Black Lives Matter, they didn't just like spring about this summer. They've been going on for centuries and we've been experiencing them for a long time and way before we even put a hashtag to it. But the difference was obviously this summer, the level of exposure was something that if you hadn't heard about it before, you can't ignore it now because there's no way that it didn't reach you. And obviously in terms of the amount of people that were protesting and the amount of states that were protesting, it made it the largest movement in American history. And what's happening in India is now the largest human protest in history because, like you said, Sophie, the amount of people that are protesting is pretty much equivalent to the amount of people that live in the States, just for context. Like, that's how many people are out there. And so I do think there's lots of differences, but one of them is exposure because the new reforms are making it, they're making small farmers vulnerable to big corporations. And the largest corporation in India, one of them, the ones that they've been protesting about, the boss of the largest corporation in India is also the head of the largest media company in the country. And I think that has been affecting it as well.
Oh, I didn't know that last bit. No, but because I was going to say definitely, I think, because I don't know if you guys saw the article around it where they were talking about like a lot of the media has been manipulated around what's going on with the protest. And so I was saying like, I definitely think the government has some control. But now that you've given us that extra piece of information, Luanda, that definitely brings things into context. I think for me, when I heard about it, when I saw the video, I was initially kind of shocked that I hadn't heard about it sooner, especially it's been going on for a couple of weeks and it hadn't even like come across my news feeds or my timelines, etc., etc. And then I started to think, I don't know if the reason, when I was thinking, why is this not here? And obviously I can think of ultimate things like the media manipulation, etc., etc. But then I thought, but why aren't the people like on my timeline, why are they not telling me about this? Like, why are they not tweeting about this? Why are they not feeling outrage? And then I thought to myself, like, maybe I think it could be because it's not like this harshly violent thing that people aren't reacting to it with as much urgency. Like, that's just my opinion. I think sometimes when you can see something like immediate violence, you want to just kind of react to respond to it. But because we're not seeing that specifically, like obviously we're hearing about they're tear gassing people and etc. But because we're not seeing that, I think some people are almost just turning a blind eye to it. In regards to what we could do to help, that is a question I don't know the answer to, but I think for me personally, it's about maybe reaching out to their diaspora communities that are here in the UK and saying, how can we support? Is it petitions? Is it more protesting? Like, what can we all do to support? Because I think with rights and human rights, whenever you're protesting about something similar to the Black Lives Matter movement, you have to, even if it's not directly your fight, you have to, like we've been saying it throughout the show, it's about allyship and it's about us banding together. So as many people that can stand up for the fight, I think is important. And yeah, that's what I think.
I would probably say as well, like one of the reasons why I don't think it's been picked up, and let's be very specific, in the Western world, where we live, is because media only focus on specific areas in news coverage. Now, I studied media a very long time ago, but we had to talk about news, broadcast news, and they're saying we only receive like 5-10% of what's going on in the world in general. Like, if they're saying that they don't think it's in areas that we care about or aren't directly linked to us, then it's not going to feature in the news. So things that happen, I don't know if you guys remember, and I only know this because I used to work in international development, but a place called Vanuatu, which is like a small country, like in the Fijian Islands, like literally on the other side of the world. And they had like a really bad, I think it was typhoon, really, really bad, but they're like, it's just not in our area to focus on. And even when we did fundraising for it at work, they're like, no one's really going to care about it because it's not in their area. They don't even know about it. So I think one of the reasons is because India is not going to feature heavily in the West. Now, the protests that happened for Black Lives Matter, they happened in America to begin with. So we're going to get a very different focus. If things happen in America, we're going to be directly linked to finding out about it. Then it happened in the UK, and then it happened in all these other developed parts of the world, and then places that were probably less developed, but mostly you got to focus on Western countries. And it's the same for if there's massive protests or things going on, even with SARS that went on a little while ago in Nigeria. The whole thing was because of people who were messaging and posting on social media. That's how we knew about it. But generally, in terms of news coverage, it's just not in our focus area.
Yeah, in terms of things that we can do to help, I saw this really helpful post by someone. It was reposted on a page called South Asian Nation. So they have a lot of information on their page, and they're reposting a lot of good people to follow. And one of the things that they said was, beware of fake news. They said, support the protests if you can, because like Sophie mentioned at the beginning, there are probably protests happening in your local area. If you can join them, then join them. And they also said to follow real accounts that are showing you what's happening on the ground. And there was a list of these accounts as well, because yeah, like I mentioned with the media, the farmers are being demonized in the media right now. So if you actually want, I guess, more of an honest representation of what's happening, you need to be following people who are on the grounds of the protests and showing us what's going on. I don't think it's because it's not violent, because it definitely is. And I saw, an alderman being beaten with a baton, and that's violent enough for me.
I did not see that. Oh, no.
Yeah, it's been crazy. They've been hit with tear gas. I saw, me, I'm sensitive, so I couldn't watch too much of it, but yes. But I saw enough. So it definitely is violent. I also think there's a lot more going on than just the farmer reforms, because there's an article, a man, I forget his name. He's an agrarian expert, and he wrote an article for The Wire called "Did You Think This Was Just About Farmers?" or something along those lines. And he talks about, in one of the farmer reforms in section 13, it actually says that the small farmers, they have no leg to stand on. You can't fight your case in court. You can't fight anything against the government, the state, or these corporations. And it's a really creepy paragraph, because it says something like, no law or no suit will be held against the state or any other persons who does something in goodwill. So it's just a stripping of basic human rights, basically, and it's really creepy. The guy, obviously, like I said, he's an expert, so he's a lot more intelligent than me, and he lays it down in a more digestible way. So for anyone that's interested, go and read that article.
Was that specifically towards farming, or just all things, like maybe people of a certain group can't put anything towards the state?
This is within the farming reform, so this is to do with farming, but he's saying that this is not just you fighting for like your lands, this is now you fighting for your human rights as well, because look at what they've snuck in there. And they're saying that this is also very intentionally happened during the crisis, because I think there's a quote that says, don't waste a good crisis or something like that, you're expecting people not to have the means to fight back. And that's why this is happening now.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point that you're bringing through, because they said that the government voted this through in September and they didn't actually liaise with any of the farmers to say whether this is what they wanted. And I think it's just a very tricky situation. And I think in terms of what we were discussing in terms of why should we care about it, I saw this article that was saying we should care about this because, you know, they produce, India produces like turmeric to us, and it's one of, if not the largest export of spices, and it's exports rice and this and that. And if you're eating rice, if you're eating these meals, then chances are you are linked to the country of India. And I was just honestly really uncomfortable with that when I read it, because I felt, why should we only be thinking about supporting people or being part of their struggle because it affects us? Like, the food on your table is affected. So like, the food on your table is affected, therefore you should be a part of this as well. And I think it takes away from the idea of actually, I think as someone said earlier, this is a human rights thing. And I think we have gotten to a very dangerous place in society, if I'm being honest, where everyone has their own personal issues. So it's like, I support Black Lives Matter as I'm Black. If you're Indian, you might support what's going on with the agricultural workers. If you're Jewish, then you're against anti-Semitism and all these different things. And we don't realize that they're actually all linked, because it's all injustice. What we're talking about is people having prejudice and injustice against them. And we should be looking at as the commonality as to all the things that are going on. Because even with the Indian diaspora, I think sometimes, like, I don't see, let me be very specific in what I'm saying. I see some friends, like I had friends who were Indian growing up, and they were just like, we were friends, really tight, best friends, this and other. Their families were more than welcome. But if it came to a thing of them being with someone who was Black, their family was like, not a chance. Like, no. Like, only so far. And I think when we still have these sort of divisions where we see ourselves as so separate from each other, it means then when the struggle's going on, well, it's not my struggle, it's their struggle, and we have our own. Because I think that feeds into also this idea of chambers, and it's called a specific word, I've forgotten it. But like when Anissa said, oh, I didn't see it on my timeline, I'm like, well, how many Indians do you have on your timeline? Because if you're not having people from various different groups represented on your timeline, then how are you going to see the major things that are going on in different communities, if that makes sense?
No, it absolutely
I'd like to say
does.
I have a very blended timeline. Just
Yes, girl.
I thought the same thing though, because I didn't hear about this story through the news. I heard about this story through my South Asian friends posting.
But this is what shocked me. This is what shocked me. This is what I'm saying. I'm surprised it didn't come onto my timeline, because I have a lot of South Asian friends, and I speak about, you know, one of my mothers in my mothering tribe, she's half Indian. So I know that her family, and what I'm saying is no one in the family, no one in my friends, nobody brought it to my attention, or even mentioned it. So for me, it was kind of like, how has this gone so underneath my radar? Not unless, you know, I mean, I know it's COVID, so people are dealing with their own stuff, but it was just, I couldn't believe it had gone that under my nose, if that makes any sense. Especially since my South Asian friends have been really good in the Black Lives Matters protest, and they're still posting about the Black Lives Injustice. So it was surprising to me that they're still posting that, but I didn't see anything about the agriculture.
I guess that's an issue within itself, because we shouldn't have to be relying on Instagram and Twitter. We should actually be seeing this in the mainstream news. We shouldn't have to be like, oh, but there wasn't an Instagram story on this, so I don't know about it. Like I said with the Black Lives Matter, like, it doesn't matter who you were following on Instagram or who you were following on Twitter, or, you know, who you were friends with on Facebook. You could not escape that news story, because it was global, and every single person, or well, it seemed like it from my point of view, that everyone was talking about it in some capacity. And it's like, if you didn't know about it before, you know about it now. So that's what I mean in the difference in exposure. Because for me, when I'm learning about this, I'm searching for it. But I feel like there was a point this past summer with the Black Lives Matter where there was no way that you could get away from it unless you literally logged off.
Yeah.
But I think that's how you digest news as well, because like me speaking personally, I don't watch the news. I don't have any news apps. I don't read the newspapers. So it's like kind of like news feeds, like I will follow like BBC World and things like that. And so it's, if the news stories pop it up on my timeline in my social media, and I think that's with a lot of people now is they're getting a lot of their information, whether it is right or wrong, who knows. But a lot of people are getting their information from social media because that's just how they're choosing to digest their news now. So that's why I was like, I'm so surprised.
Yeah. No, but that's fine. I just
one
think
of
it should be. I was just going to say it should have been an official.
Yeah, it should have been like an official story. Yeah. No, I agree. All parts.
Because I was saying as well, like, I think that one of the ways that we can really support this movement that's going on for the agricultural workers, because they're like, they are not going to finish protesting until they get what they want. And one thing that really spoke to me was just their sense of unity. Just like, it's just so phenomenal, like the way there is these farmers and workers are there. And you have to think, like, India, over half of the people who live in India are agricultural workers. Like, this affects the majority of people. And I think that we need to make sure that we keep it in our conversations. The same way that people have to keep talking about Black Lives Matter, we say, we have to keep talking about what's going on in India. And one, that keeps it within the public domain, but also it makes sure that if anything is going on, like tear gas or violence or this or that, if we keep talking about it as a world, it can't take its eye off of it. Therefore, the government has to treat people better because they don't want to kind of take down their opinion or their reputation in the world's view. So yeah, India, we're with you.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought someone was going to have something to say to that one.
No. I agreed wholeheartedly. Yeah, we were like, no, I agree. 100%.
Okay, so let me move on. So despite revealing fantastic listening figures on Spotify in 2020 on Instagram, singer and dancer Teyana Taylor has announced her retirement from music. She says, and I quote, "I constantly feel alone. I constantly feel underappreciated. I constantly feel failed." And she was talking about the lack of support that she's been getting from Def Jam Records, or so she says, allegedly. Let me just put that out there. But one thing I would say about Teyana Taylor is that I'm so excited because now she has announced that she is the new creative director at Pretty Little Thing. So I wanted to ask you ladies, how do you define success in your work, and how do you know when it's time for you to move on from a job or a career path?
I feel like, I'll take the first part of your question first. I feel like the first bit is a bit tricky because I feel like success is something so subjective, but that's why obviously you've asked, how do I define it? And I guess my answer in short is I don't really define it. And I know that sounds crazy, but just the way that my mind kind of works and ticks over things, it's like if I have a job, I'm doing the job, whether I'm doing it well and it's yielding certain results and things like that. I guess I'm not really, I guess I don't really pay attention to that kind of bit. I guess I just don't measure myself. That is the clear cut of it. I don't measure myself, so I don't really have the idea of that. In regards to moving on to a job, now listen, I have moved on from a few jobs, and I think moving on is all personal reasons, and sometimes the business makes you move on. But I think it depends on all your different workplaces. And for me, most of the reasons why I've left other workplaces is because I felt as if I had done all that I wanted to do there or all that I could do there. So now it was time for me to do something new. So even when it's been in the midst of me, like, really enjoying my job, like amazing things are happening and like, oh yeah, it's great, because I know I've been there for 2 years already. It's like, you know what, I'm really enjoying this, but I've done all that I could do here, and maybe let me do something new. And so when anybody looks at my CV, you'll see I've jumped from industry to industry to industry because I want to just try something new all the time. So for me, my career, when it's time to move on, is when you just feel like you've done all that you could do or done all that you could do and you should just move on.
I kind of think that Teyana had the right idea of when you should be moving on because she was basing it off of her feelings. And I think we should maybe pay attention to, like, is it like, I just go for the like negative positive balance. You know what I mean? Like, is it doing more harm than good? If yes, au revoir. And I feel like that was happening with her with music. Although the thing with Teyana is that basically, I think she just wants to leave the label because she said something along the lines of, maybe if I retire, then they'll finally let me go. Because she said, if I can have my full freedom like she wants, then she'll do music in a heartbeat, because obviously it's one of her passions amongst many other things. But for us in general, I think that sometimes we go for things that look good to the outside world. Like sometimes we make choices through the lens of how we think other people will view it instead of what's actually going to make us happy. I think I read an article, and I can't remember, this was maybe a couple of weeks ago. I think we maybe talked about this on the show, but my brain is frying right now. But there was a woman who she took like a 40 grand paycheck. I can't remember where she was working, but she was earning like 60 grand a year. And then she decided to go and be a teacher. This was all during lockdown, because so many people have had so much time for self-reflection. So if you're a person who's used to living a certain type of lifestyle and you have friends from a certain class, and then you, for your happiness, you're going to take that much of a pay cut because it's going to make you happy, there's going to be a lot of people that have something to say about it. People will call you an idiot for, not having more money. But if you're choosing your happiness, then you're always doing the right thing, and that's the way that I measure it.
I think for me, like, it's various things, and I think that what has defined success for me continues to evolve the older I get and the more I work. So I'd say currently it's probably enjoyment, fulfillment, support, teamwork, money that allows me to have a certain amount of freedom, and I'd probably say appreciation as well. Like, that's a long list, but it's all of those things, and it's not going to be like that all the time in your workplace. But if I don't feel like I'm getting up in the morning and I feel like this is really fulfilling, I feel like I'm doing something that is making a difference, that I'm achieving something, like I'm helping people, or it's making an impact, then I probably find it quite lacking. And I think I've learned very much over the past few years that I want to work in a place like success for me is somewhere where you can be part of a team. Like, I really like to be part of a team that can rely on each other and support each other to do the best. And I really feel what Teyana Taylor was saying in terms of underappreciation. As much as you can work on a project and you know that, yeah, I killed it, I slayed it, I did great, it's always nice to work amongst people who appreciate what it is that you're putting out into the world. Like, appreciate what you're contributing to this workplace, to this team, like whatever it is. So I think for me, those would be how I currently define success. And I guess I'm just trying to find the balance now, as somebody who has also taken COVID as a chance to kind of think about what is it now is going to be the next step in my life? Like, what is going to be the next career step? About how do all of those things really mesh together, which are going to be like the top of the pile. Because I think for Teyana Taylor, this is someone who's been doing music for a long time. And it also really reminded me, if I'm being honest, of Rihanna, someone who got into the music industry when she was 15 and now is focusing more on beauty and her clothing line. And she says, I got in when I was really young. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I think Teyana Taylor is showing that thing that started off with millennials, bloop, bloop, going down to Generation Z as well. But this idea of like, actually what I'm doing doesn't have to be the thing that I'm doing for the rest of my life. Like, I can, as Anissa said, I can jump from career to career to career and kind of see what's out there. So I think for me, it's an exciting time because of COVID. But also it can be a bit of a scary time when you have to move on and take that next step.
I think also that Teyana is so young as well. Like, she only just turned 30, which was mind-blowing to me because she's achieved so much. And that's why I think that, it's subjective. And I really think at the end of the day, the only person that can make you feel successful is yourself. Because I know so many musicians that would give an arm and a leg to have an eighth of the talent that Teyana has, because she is just incredibly talented across the board of performance. So, and creation, because now she's going to be the creative director of Pretty Little Thing. So she's just not lacking on any level. But again, like Sophie said, it goes back to how much you're recognized, because I think sometimes when you're doing something incredible or what you believe is good, and especially with something as personal as art, and people are disregarding it, and you put in more work and then you just get more dismissiveness, and that happens for quite a few years, it's going to take a mental toll on anybody. And I like the fact that she said, I need to be here for my children, so I'm going to just make sure that like I'm happy, and that's the most important thing, because I'm raising a family. And even if she wasn't, she has herself to live for.
And I think what you said, like, she actually said, I want to be alive for my children. Because when she said she was going to retire, all these fans came in and people saying, stay for your fans, stay in the music industry for your fans. And she was just like, stay for the fans. Like, I appreciate that, but I need to be alive for my children. Like, if this is not serving me and it's like affecting my mental health, I'm not going to put the fans first. I'm going to be like, my children will need me to be alive. So I think definitely thinking about how work is going to impact you. But I think this idea of what success is also changes with generations as well. Like, I think definitely for our parents' generation, it wasn't always about whether you're enjoying your job. It's whether you had a stable job that can provide for you. And that was a measure of success. But now, as those things are happening successively in our generations, I would say, in people being able to provide for themselves, like a home or food, now it's coming to actually, that's not enough. Like, it's not enough for me to just pay for the electricity. I want more.
Yeah, I just enjoyed listening to Teyana speak out about it. You know, she's always very like a raw and very honest, straight to the point person. But I just enjoyed it because like for years I've heard her complain about this label, just like for years. And now to see her finally make a decision and say, listen, I'm going to retire since you guys don't want to do that for me. And I think it was important even for like when I'm thinking about my younger brothers and things like that, and just like younger generation in general, that sometimes you can be doing things that you love and maybe you're doing it for a company that doesn't serve you. And it's this whole idea, like sometimes, especially I feel like in the minority communities, it's this whole idea of being grateful, like grateful that you have a job, like grateful that these people gave this to you or whatever, and you're not allowed to have your own terms. And so that's why I liked that Teyana was doing it, because instead of her being like, yeah, you picked me up when I was 15 in Harlem, and so now I have to be grateful, forever indebted to you that you gave me this opportunity. She's like, no, it doesn't cut it for me anymore. And that's what I took from that message. And it just makes me, it is definitely a generational thing, just circling back to Sophie's thing, because when I've worked in companies, I've worked in like a lot of companies that's have like legacy and heritage, have been around for 250 years. And a lot of the people, they started in maybe in reception and now they're director or whatever. And they've been there for like 40 years. And I remember just sitting there being like, what have you been doing for 40 years? Like, you know, you pick their brain. Why have you stayed this long? Is it that you love this company this much? And it's usually because it's like, oh, you know, you're comfortable and they're kind of going with the flow, but they'll be the first to complain about how crap everything is and how everything's changed and it's not the same anymore. Boo, boo, boo. And my question is like, then why don't you leave? Like, it's just like, why don't you leave? And it's this idea of, but why should I leave? Like, I'm just staying here. And I find that reasoning just bizarre. Like, not to spill any tea, but my manager said to me the other day, oh, Nisa, don't ever leave. And I said, no, well, I got to die someday, so I will be leaving. Like, I don't intend to be here for that long. And even if I'm enjoying the job, but even if I wasn't enjoying the job, it's that kind of like, a lot of older companies have that culture where even if you're not enjoying it, you just stay, and you just keep going. And I am not of that belief, honey. When you are ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a job in a restaurant and I met this woman, instantly didn't like her, like instantly. Like I'm really good at like, you know, when someone just says like one thing and you kind of get like an idea of their personality, and I'm not usually wrong. Okay. Also wasn't in that scenario. Doesn't mean that I treat them badly. It doesn't mean that I treat them badly. It just, I see in my mind like, yeah, you're not for me. But anyway, I got there and she was kind of like, I guess a job's worth, when she was kind of like by the book, and I was like training. So the people said to me, oh, what do you want from the menu? And then I picked something vegan, and the woman was like, oh, she can't have that, because even though the manager was approving this, by the way, about to give me this salad, I was ready to eat that. And she was like, oh no, because the staff meals are only from this part of the menu and the salads come on this side of the menu, so she can't, and that's the rules. And I was like, yeah, I don't like you.
But my God, the manager has said it's okay.
The manager said it's okay, but she thought that she ran the restaurant, Anissa, because she had been there, I think, and I'm not exaggerating, either 20 or 25 years in that same job, in that same restaurant. And like you said, it was because she was very comfortable. She didn't want to leave. People are just, they get so stuck in their routines and they don't want really anything else. For me, like, because obviously she's middle-aged now, I just don't feel like I could be a middle-aged person and have a 21-year-old manager. and have like 18-year-old colleagues or like 16-year-old colleagues.
Don't be ageist, Luanda. Do not be ageist.
I think we're being a little tough because I think part of it is like, that it's just a completely, I think for some people, it's just a completely different mindset that we're not going to get because we're just not of that generation. Like for them, I think some of it is comfortability. I definitely think that. But I think also it was a mindset of once you got a job for life. So people did that. They just got a job and they're like, this is the job I'm going to work at. And it allows me to provide to a certain extent. And therefore, I'm just going to, stay and see it out. And to be fair, companies used to look after those long-term people. They would have great pensions, great benefits, great this, that. And you cannot now get great retirement packages or pension. But like those things don't even exist. So I think there's definitely pros and cons, but yeah,
I see what you're saying, but I don't think it's I understand that it's like what the generalization for the generation above us, but actually I think it's more of a personality trait because I know people of that generation who are like, I've been in this job long enough now, I need to move on, I need something fresh. Like they have that same mindset as Anissa. And then I also know people my age who have the same mindset as that middle-aged woman that I met in the restaurant who just get one thing and they're good. So I think it's more of like who you are as a person and what feels right to you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
I think it might change, because I would probably say I was a person who might have thought like, actually, I'm happy in the job that I'm in and I'm happy to stay here for a very, very, very long time. But as time has gone on and my desires have changed and I've changed, it's made me want to change as well. So I don't know if it's definitely down to mindset because I wouldn't want to say it's something that can never change. Like, because I think your mindset... that's the point. That's why I'm saying I don't think it's a set mindset. I don't think it's something like that's that person's mindset, so that's how they think. I think that there's always a freedom to be able, like you said, some people during lockdown who have been one way, thought they were going to do one career, something massive happens, and they're like, actually, what are the other things that I've been interested in that I've always wanted to do and I never had a chance? And I think I'm really grateful for COVID giving people this shift of what is actually important in life and what do I want to do with my career.
For sure.
Yeah, sorry, just to bounce off what Luanda was saying, yes, I've been pondering. Yeah, I don't think it's mindset, but I think it could be personality type. That's what I'm just thinking, because some people are just habitual in nature. Do you know what I mean? They like the same cycle. So maybe it's more people that are a bit like that who don't want to. Sorry, I've just been pondering it in my mind.
Yeah, no, I hear both of you. That brings us to the halfway mark of the episode. We have more Ethnically Speaking coming up, but whilst I have your attention, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. So far, we have talked about the farmers' protests in India and also how we would know when it's time to move on from a job. Now, would you move on from planet Earth? Space tourism is finally set to become a reality. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, and all your regular rich men have companies that are taking you to the moon and back. So people have already prepaid for their flights and they're setting off as early as next year. Would you take a trip around the moon if you could afford it, or do you think it's a waste of money?
I don't have any urgent wants to really, space travel. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never really been that curious by nature. I'm not a particularly curious person, like this little kitty will not die by curiosity. Like, I will be fine. And so I don't particularly want to go. The only thing that could slightly change my mind is because when I was reading up about this, I was reading how some celebrities have already bought their tickets, like Justin Bieber and Leonardo DiCaprio. And I thought to myself, hold on. Why are all the rich people buying all the tickets and they're free to go? That basically made me start to feel like if people were starting to plot an escape plan, they're going to start with the rich first and us people at the very low of the change and be left here doing what? Who knows what? So for me, if they at least gave a few people that were, I guess, more normal earnings a chance to get a ticket or not, then that for me would, it'd balance things up. I don't want it to just be like this big secret plan where they're plotting to move the elite somewhere else and leave the rest of us here to do some Lord of the Flies. Like, I don't want that. So that's not really for me. But the idea of space tourism, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. That's the whole thing. I wouldn't encourage anyone to go. If they wanted to, they should. But I think I need to see Justin and Leo go first, and then them come back, and then I could know if I would want to. I need someone to go first.
You are on these conspiracy theories.
I'm not a conspiracist, but you have to be careful. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm usually not a conspiracist.
Not about the curiosity of it, but the idea of the elite are trying to run away from us, and it means that something there is going.
No, it's not that they're trying to run, but it's if they had to run, if something was about to happen to Earth, and they were the only ones given the opportunity, like on the Titanic, honey, only like the rich people were. But then my question would be, okay, are we all getting the same opportunity to go on this space tourism, or is it something where they're going to alienate people from? And why would they do that? That's just my questions.
I mean, I think they're alienating people from it, to be honest, because it's so damn expensive. Like, I think that's the reason why you're only seeing people at the mega end of the pay scale applying to go, because I think for some people it's like millions of, like, one woman paid £250,000 to get a seat on. Other people, there's going to be a hotel in space is what they're building, and they said it's going to be £7 million to stay there. Like, 7
But how do they
million.
know that the building is going to stay, or is it going to be a floaty hotel? My question is, how do they know it's going to stay on the planet?
To be honest, I think it's the same way that the satellites do. Like in space, like they kind of hang there. Do you know what I mean? And they said they're building all of these things. So I think this is definitely space tourism. I think at the moment, at least, it's definitely something for the rich and famous. And, well, not the famous, the rich, because it's not just famous people. But I wonder if it's people who are rich and bored. Because I just don't possibly really understand this dire need to see what it's like in the stars. Like, space tourism doesn't really have that much interest for me, if I'm being honest. Like, there are so many places on Earth that I still want to visit. But if you're rich and you can go anywhere that you want to in the world, I think there is that next level of exclusivity of what is next. Like, I can really do anything. What else can I do? What is going to bring a buzz that I can do that I could never possibly do, or that people won't have access to? Space tourism comes in. And I think it's all just, I really want to see if it happens, because there's been so many different people who have tried, so many different trial runs at it that haven't worked, or programs that have broken down. So let's see if this thing actually goes ahead.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to see if it goes ahead. And my just thoughts are, like, at least on the plane, please just have one not normal person, but someone of like a different earning, because as great as it would be for the celebrities, they've seen so much of the world, like would be the next step. Imagine someone who just hasn't even been able to go to another country, do you know what I mean? Then they get to go in the stars. It'd be such an amazing experience. Like, that's just what I was thinking. But like you, I'm not a space fanatic. However, I do think space tourism, it would be a great idea for anybody who works in like astronomy or something, or anything like that. Because imagine your whole work and life is dedicated to a field that you never get to touch, like, directly, or be able to see or experience. So it's kind of like, if I was an astronomer, like, I would 100% want to do up space tourism, because then I get to like really be in the atmosphere of what I'm working about, and like my passion. So I definitely feel like I want them to hopefully open it up to more people. I understand it comes at a cost of things, but I think that's just a nice way to like everyone gets a chance. But maybe I'm being too nice and being like, maybe everyone should go. Like, do you know what I mean?
Well, firstly, I wasn't going to bring up this rich people on the moon thing, but since Anissa started us off, let me just say, I don't think it's that far-fetched, because let's be completely honest, okay? If we actually destroy this planet, which we are, and scientists know and rich people know we only have a certain amount of years left before this is an unlivable environment, what are we going to do next? We're going to have to go and destroy another one. So I don't think it's like too much of a reach to think that super rich people have like a little, escape plan with a couple hotels on the moon. In terms of doing the space tourism thing, I really actually would do this if I had the money, but I'm kind of like you, Sophie. Like, I think there's so much more to do on Earth that I would wait until this was like a super big milestone birthday. Like the woman who paid $250,000 to do it, she's like 61. I would do it when I'm 60. You know what I mean? Like, oh, my 60th birthday, my 70th birthday. But there's so much for me to do on Earth still that I would rather like focus on, doing that. And then I'd head to the space thing afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I guess I would go older in life just in case anything happened and then I could have achieved everything that I needed to. Because the thing is, even when these guys go, whoever these first people will be, it's not going to be as it's going to be rigorously tested, but they're not going to have as many flights that come out of like London Heathrow go into space. Do you know what I mean? So with every single flight, there's going to be a risk. And I guess when you're jumping on that little aircraft, you have to decide, like, there might be a chance I'm not coming back to planet Earth and I have to be okay with this. And that's a real thought. Not to throw any more conspiracies, but that's a real thought to have. I mean, I don't know if you guys even think...
No,
do you guys think that when you get on the airplane? Because I'm not a bad flyer, but I have friends who are bad flyers. So every time we get on the airplane, she does think this could be her last. Yeah? And so... she prepares herself for that. So I was like, people might prepare for themselves like that if they were going for a rocket.
I think it's realistic. Like the way that we are looking at these space tourism trips now is probably the way that people were looking at planes, a couple years ago.
That's very true.
Yeah, when we have kids, or maybe when they have kids, this is going to be so normal, and people who are like maybe scared to do it, they're going to be like, looked at sideways, like people who are praying in the airport, which I think is absolutely fine. But again, before the planes, then people were doing the same thing with cars, and it just depends on what's normalized in your community whilst you're growing up, what's normalized in your society whilst you're growing up. That's why I probably want to be super old, but I'm never going to be ready to die. Like I keep telling you guys about this. I'm never going to be ready. Maybe
to 100.
Past 100. I might have to do on my 100th birthday just to make sure that.
So if you won,
would you be able to pass
if you won a ticket?
I am not going to be a regular 100-year-old either. I'm not going to be a regular old person. I'm not going to be a regular 30 or 40 or 50 or 60-year-old. Okay, I'm about it.
What's a regular 30-year-old?
I know 30 was a bit young. I was reaching. I was just saying numbers, Sophie. Because last topic, I was like, Teyana Taylor's so young. She's only 30. So like, I'm reaching.
So if you won a ticket in a raffle right now to say that you got a chance, a free trip to space now, you'd be on the rocket, your backseat just behind Justin, but Leo's right in front of you, you're sandwiched right between them. You want a free ticket in the raffle right now. Are you going for both of you?
No way. Going. I would definitely sell that ticket. Do you know how much that would be worth in our day and age?
That's a good point.
I don't know if it's going to become as common in the future as Lawanda said. I think that'd be crazy, but mobile phones and the internet would probably been crazy to like my dad when he talks to me about the radio he used to listen to like once a week in Jamaica growing up. So we have lost all sense of what technology can do and how quickly it comes along. And I think that even with space tourism coming about, immediately we're already seeing these big competitors going after each other about who can do it. So like you said, there's Elon Musk, there's Richard Branson, there is, who's the other one? Jeff Bezos from Amazon. And I just feel like, why does there always have to be a sense of competition of who's going to do it the best, who's going to be the fastest, I just feel like it's space tourism, guys. Can we just not work together? Like everyone's still trying to find the best deal, but I would definitely sell my ticket and then, just earn the millions that it would cost. Like I'm a business person in that one.
This is exactly what I mean by rich people knowing what's coming up next, okay? That's why they're in competition, because they know what's next. They're like, we've done the trains and that was cute. We did your little delivery service and that was cute. But the moon, though, the moon, people. And hypothetically, let's say that I wasn't allowed to sell my ticket because this is a big deal. You go into space, right? You might not be able to just pass it on to anyone. Might be you specific person has to go. So in that scenario, I would definitely take the offer up and I would actually go with that Japanese billionaire, because he said, he was like, I'm gonna go with a bunch of artists and we're gonna make this whole, I can't remember what he was gonna call it, like something to the moon, journey to the moon, for like they wanted,
it was like Dear Moon or something. It was like something
like Dear Moon. And it was gonna be an art project. I will do it for the art, bro. Do you know what? I'm doing it.
When I saw that guy, I just thought,
can you imagine the poem I'd write? Okay, I'm done.
I could just imagine that white astronaut suit.
I just thought it was more money than sense when I read about that Japanese billionaire, because I was just like, you're really going to take all these people and then you're going to have their paintings and then I'm just like, he's got too much free time. He needs to be doing something with all that time that he has to think about this and then buy out a plane to space. It It doesn't make
When you
sense.
I don't
have
think
time
he
and money,
became a
you can do
billionaire
anything.
with
This
free
is what
time.
I'm
I think
saying.
it's
That's what I'm
fine.
saying. I think it's something
Yeah,
of the
when you
rich
have time
because
and
I'm
money,
just like
you can
that
do
time and
anything.
money. You could just think of, you could think of whatever you want to do. But what are some of you guys like extravagant tourism plans then? Like if it's not going to the moon, what's something extravagant that you wanted to do on Earth?
You know, I kind of don't have big plans. Like, I know that I definitely want to travel and I want to see a lot of places and I want to experience a lot of cultures, but I've kind of tried to let that be an organic experience because I kind of find it a little bit strange when people romanticize places that they've never been. Um, well, that's a whole different conversation because I would say why, but you know what, Anissa, you speak.
I'm almost curious about what you were going to say,
I mean,
but
I'm curious too, but I feel like we're going to go down the rabbit hole if we even
different
touch
zone,
that.
yes.
So I think it's probably
that's why
we
I
should
was
just-
like, I'm not going to say anything else.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
I will not move on. I think for me, luxurious travel plans. I don't think if I have any specific luxury travel plans. I know that in my mind, I've always said that I wanted to visit. I wanted to go on like a Caribbean island tour. Like I want to go to all the islands, and so I know in my mind I've said things like that. But that's the only thing. I don't think I have any. No, I don't think. I don't think I have any. Sophie.
I think for me, to be honest, like there's a couple things. So out of the 7 continents on in the world, yeah, the world or Earth, I guess, because we're seeing the world as bigger because we're going to do space tourism. But the world as we currently know it, I've travelled to 6 of the 7. So I'd like to go to the 7th, which is Antarctica. But it's really expensive to go. So it's like £6,000, and that's like the
To be
bottom
cold.
end. Yeah, it's the bottom end of going to Antarctica. So I'd like to do that. And I would also probably like to go on the train from Russia that goes straight through to China. So it takes you right across the country through the scenic route of Russia. So those are the things that I would like to do before I broach space tourism.
My thing is, why have they focused so heavily on space tourism? What happened when haven't they been trying to make this dream of a flying car for like the last 25 years? I feel like they've really ditched that and have gone straight to space.
We
Like,
see
in
You know
my
what?
mind.
I think because space tourism is an untapped market. It's like
But a
virgin
flying
territory.
car would be
But
untapped.
It would be, but I think the virgin territory-ness of space tourism, and you know you're already tapping into billionaires. Like this isn't, if you want to make money, this is the place to invest your shares because you're like, once it gets off the ground, you're going to have to be in a certain financial bracket to do it. So it makes sense from a financial perspective, but I'm happy to just sit my butt on Earth.
Yeah.
Depends on how much the buy-in is for the shares. Then maybe I'd invest. A pound. If it's a pound, if I could put in a pound, I'll just put in the pound and see what it does.
It will grow. Just invest it to Bitcoin. It will grow over time. Well, speaking of new and exciting things, kind of, Disney has announced that Sister Act 3 will be coming to theatres almost 30 years after Whoopi Goldberg starred in the original. There's also been talks of remaking the 1980s classic film Three Men and a Baby, and they're looking at Zac Efron to play one of the roles as well. Do you think that the remakes can be better than the originals and that the sequels can be better than the first films? And when people make these remakes, do you think they're trying to tap into a new audience or they're trying to keep the love of the old audience that they once had?
I love films, guys, so I'm gonna take this one. And
noticed.
I think that honestly I do. I love films, all of them. I think that it's very difficult for sequels to be better than the originals. It does happen on off chances like The Godfather 2, Thor Ragnarok wasn't specifically a sequel. It was like the threequel. That was probably
that was the best
probably
Thor
the best one out of all of them. Yeah, really, really good. Also, The Dark Knight Rises was better than The Dark Knight. So there are The Dark Knight, sorry, was better than Batman. Was it Batman Begins? I think it was called Batman Begins.
I think
anyway,
it was,
the Christian Bale ones, the second one was much better. It was stand out, to be honest, the best one in the series. So it can happen, but I think it happens very rarely. And in terms of films that are better than their originals, I think those are even fewer than sequels that are better. I would say The Nutty Professor, I think that was a better than the original. If you didn't know already that was a remake, the one with Eddie Murphy. Also The Parent Trap. Yeah, The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan, that was good. I could possibly say Jumanji, the Rocks one. But I don't know where to place that one. I don't know if I would call that a remake or like a sequel. I'm not really sure, and I was very nervous when it came out, but it was actually very good, and even the sequel to his one was actually good as well, so he's on a roll there. In terms of different audiences, I definitely think they're trying to tap into different audiences because there's more money there. There's a generation that hasn't seen that film already and that you can get involved with it, but the older generation who originally saw it are also going to have an interest because it's linked to their youth or their growing up experience. And Three Men and a Baby is actually a remake. I didn't even know that. So it was already a remake in the 80s and now they're remaking it. But have you ladies even seen Three Men and a Baby? That's how
Of course we haven't, Sophie. Ask me silly questions now. You already know.
I knew
You know what I thought when I saw this question? I was like, should I go and watch this film? Because I know she's going to ask me questions in this remake. And you know I even heard of it before.
Neither have I.
It is a good film. It's a comedy. It's about three men. It's about a woman who kind of lives with three men very close to them. She gets pregnant. She doesn't know who the father is. And like all of them raise the baby together and then they end up in these funny scenarios. So it's a nice little comedy. So, but I just feel like it loses its magic when you're constantly having to remake things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you about what you said about reintroducing the story to a younger generation, because I think it's like a lot of the stories that are being reintroduced are almost like legacy stories. Like like Lion King was one of my favorite movies when I was a child. So when my little brother was growing up, I was like, oh, let's put on Lion King, because it was like me just representing what meant so much to me. And I think Disney's definitely tapping in with that. Like we've seen them now make the live reaction of Lion King, Aladdin, Mulan. So I think we're seeing them bring back their legacy stories. I mean, Cinderella's been done 100 times, you know what I mean? So it's like one of those things where they've found something that works and they want to do it again. Do I think that sequels and threequels, I think it once again depends on the movie. Because I know you were for Jumanji, Sophie, but I was not. So that's why I was kind of like,
okay.
I liked The Rock and Kevin Hart's and Jack Black's version. Like I did, but it wasn't Robin Williams Jumanji for me. And not that it was meant to, but it just didn't have the same effect. I think they're two different stylings.
They're two completely different films.
Yes.
Yeah, for real.
Exactly, because like the Rock one was more comedy and I felt like Robin Williams was a little bit more mystique. And so I think it was two different vibes. But then when I started to really think hard about what sequel or threequel movies do I prefer over the original? And I really had to sit and really stew on this and think, I cannot think of it. Then the first thing that popped in my mind was Rio 2, which is like an animation I really enjoyed.
Great film.
I loved Rio 2 versus Rio. So I was like, yeah, okay. They go to the Amazon jungle. I'm here for it. Okay. I loved the continuing Toy Stories. So that was always like a good vibe for me. Then I thought, did I like The Incredibles? I wasn't sure. And then I thought about the remakes. Obviously, there's been 100 Spider-Mans, but I really liked Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, I do. And so I don't think sequels and threequels can always work. And I think sometimes that has to do with either the writing, because sometimes they bring the story to a place where it didn't even need to go. And so we as the viewer are just kind of like, why are we even here? And secondly, sometimes the budget isn't as good as the first movie. So you can't even appreciate if it's a good story.
You know what's so funny, Anissa, when you were talking about Jumanji and you were like, The Rock and Jack Black and Kevin Hart, I was about to be like, you better put some respect on her name. And then I couldn't remember her name, but I think it's Catherine Gillian.
I can't remember her name.
Is it? I think it's Catherine Gillian. I really like her as an actress, and I literally found it was about she was the Doctor Who's assistant, and she was also the blue sister in the Avengers films. She was in that film with Emma Watson called The Circle.
Nebula.
As well. Nebula, that's her name, yeah. She's Nebula.
Oh, but Nebula's always in the makeup, so I wouldn't have recognised her.
But did you not see her when she was the Doctor Who's assistant?
I've never watched Doctor Who.
Don't watch Doctor Who.
Fair enough then. Fair. Because that was her big breakthrough role. Doesn't matter. Oh man, I was so focused on the Catherine thing and I really hope that's her name and I completely forgot everything else I was going to say. But I think in terms of remakes, I don't want to see a remake if I can remember the original. So with Sister Act, obviously it's not a remake, it's the third film. But I didn't know that these films were older than I am. I genuinely grew up watching them, so I didn't know that they were made in 1992 and 1996. What? they're my films though, but they're from my childhood. So how
I
could they
just
be
feel
made
like
to
Luanda, that
me?
is like the height. I'm gonna say this as
I
nice
don't know
as
how
possible.
Luanda did not know
I
this.
feel like that's the height of like the current generation. A film existed before me? What?
For real, because my whole thing is, it's like, if I can remember it, then it doesn't need to be remade. With something like Three Men and a Baby, I don't remember that movie. You can remake it if you want, but I feel like we need to wait at least 50 years before we remake a film, because we watch a film.
50 years?
Come on, yes,
5-0 is
Nothing
extreme.
would ever get made if we had to wait 50 years
But
for it
think
to be
about
made.
how many Les Mis we have, how many Snow Whites we have, how many Cinderellas. They date back. You know what I mean? I just don't need it again and again and again, when actually there are so many intelligent creatives that have so many innovative ideas that we can be putting the money to make those stories instead of remaking the ones that have already happened. And I do think it is like just kind of like a surefire way of getting an audience, because they know, oh, if Lion King was a hit, so let's make Lion King again, because obviously the kids are going to love it, because the kids loved it all those decades ago and they continue to love it. Like Anissa said, like, I showed it to my brother and we do this and we watch it as a family. They're going to love it again, and we're just going to remake it. We've got the budget. Disney's a big deal. We're going to cast Beyonce and Childish Gambino. Let's go. But interestingly enough, I think that I do think that they're pandering to new audiences, because every time they make a remake, they kind of retract the problematic messaging in the original films, because they know that the new audiences probably will pick up on it, or that the old audiences have grown up and they're still going to watch the remake and they don't want to see it again. So for example, because I just talked about Lion King, obviously all that we see throughout the media, especially the media a couple of years ago, with villains, the villains are always people of color. And I know this is a cartoon, but it still works. With the lions, the evil lion was like brown, a brown dark-skinned lion, and then the good lion was like a light golden lion. And so for me, I wouldn't have watched the new film if they kept that, but they didn't. What they did in the new Lion King was they kept everyone the same color. They just made the evil lion matted and a little bit gray, instead of making him visibly darker than the hero. So I appreciate that. Oh, one last thing. Also with Aladdin, because this is what I mean by they retract the problematic aspects of the originals, they actually gave Princess Jasmine some lines and a song, and I was here for it. Instead of being just a beautiful 16-year-old to marry like a pauper, like, she had a song, and it was called something like Speechless or Speaking Out, or they were very conscious of the fact that we're trying to give her a moment where she has her voice, and I liked that.
Well, I think that's something really interesting you're saying, in the idea that some films, I think it's necessary for them to be remade for a new generation. And I think there are certain films that we've seen that we're so, A Star is Born, I think the one with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga was like the third time maybe it had been remade.
Third? I thought it was second.
No,
I thought this was the first time.
No, so there was.
And I still didn't watch it.
Barbara Streisand.
I didn't watch any of them.
Barbara Streisand, but she wasn't the one that made it famous. The one before, I think it was Judy Garland. That was the one that was actually the big one. The Barbara Streisand one didn't actually do that well. I think it was the Judy Garland one, and then there was one before that. So this was like the third or fourth time it had been remade. But if you weren't of those generations, you don't remember. And I know you say 50 years, but every generation is like 10 years. So I know a friend. I knew a friend, and he said to his kid, "You got to watch The Matrix because it was," and he was just like, "That old film, like, wasn't that made in the 90s?" So generations aren't usually ones to kind of really go back and watch all these old films unless they have a real interest there. So I think they are tapping into a market. But I think something that you said that I really wanted to pick up on, Luanda, was that it is frustrating because there are so many new stories out there, but production companies want something that's bankable, because they're like, people are going to turn up to Mulan, one, because they want to take their children to something, and two, because there's people in their 30s up and downwards for a few years who will remember the original and go and see it. So I think they're trying to make money, and I think it does take something away from the film industry, because I feel like remakes, sometimes when they make a remake, sometimes you're just like, if the film was really good, you're just like, it didn't need to be remade. You can literally show it to a child the way that it is, and it will be fine.
The only thing I'll have to say on that is, as somebody who cannot watch slightly older films, So my manager tried to tell me to watch Dirty Dancing, and I could not because the picture is too old for me. I like the new visuals.
Anissa,
I'm so sorry.
I
can't do it. I cannot do it, and I have tried. I can't. I need the graininess is not for me. I can't do it. I physically cannot.
The majority of the best films have not been made probably in our lifetime. So where does that leave you?
That's fine. That's absolutely fine with me. I've lived this life so far happy, so it makes no difference.
Oh my God.
But for me,
every time we talk about film, I just
You're gonna get
spirit.
You might agree with what I'm going to say next. You might agree with what I'm going to say next. One issue that I have though with the film industry, and sometimes when they make sequels or threequels, is the gap between the movies. And I think the longer the gap shows you how not necessary it was sometimes. And the reason why I say that is I really like the number 1 and number 2 of Bridget Jones. Like, I loved it. I'm a Bridget Jones fan. Like, I bloody loved it. Do you know what I mean? When number 3 was coming, I was thinking, we're having a third. It was like a good 10 years afterwards. And I was thinking, I don't know. Is Bridget still going to be a mess this many years later? And then when she came, everybody was significantly older. And it was a lot for me to get my head around. I could not watch the story because I was just looking at how much everyone had aged. And not because they had aged badly, but it was because I could not separate that you left me in number 2. She's just fresh off Thailand. She has a nice tan. Everything is fine. You know, Mark Darcy, la 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 la. She's now 10, 11 years older. No, man, nothing's going on with her. She's still a mess and she's aged. It was too much for me to deal with. I'd say even now that I'm thinking Sister Act, it's been a while since 1996. Do I really need a third Sister Act? I don't like this long period of time. It tells me I don't need it. And if you're bringing it back, it could be just for that. That's just my personal opinion. I can't.
I think that's really... let me speak on that, Raw. I think that's really interesting because I don't know if I always agree with that, but I can understand what you're saying because I thought Bridget Jones' Diary number 2 was pants. Honestly, I thought it was rubbish.
Really?
I did. I thought it was awful. With bad sequels, I pretend like they don't exist because it taints the memory of the first. So Sex and the City 2, I'm gonna just pretend that didn't exist because there was just no point to that film. But I think with Bridget Jones, it was nice to see the characters had moved on and that they weren't in the same place. So her friend, who they'll be getting drunk with, they're like, I can't do that anymore because I've got kids, I've got a business. And even for Bridget, she wasn't as much of a mess as she was before. She's held on to her job, she progressed. So I really like the idea of moving the character on in time if it's done well, but I think it can be rarely done that good.
So I just wanted to say, in terms of me struggling with old films, it's not the same reason as Anissa, because Anissa said the quality, she just can't do it. Shot an iPhone, she can't do it. But I think for me, genuinely the issues that I find, what I said earlier about how when they remake films, they kind of retract some of the problematic elements. It really frustrates me watching films with the eyeballs that I have now and the mind that I have now and picking up on all these elements, and I just spend my time being frustrated for an hour and a half instead of enjoying a movie. When you have the classic films that you watch as a kid, you don't actually notice most of the things that are wrong with it until you get older. But now that I'm older, watching the old films, I'm just picking up on racism and sexism, and it's really frustrating. I watched a documentary on Hollywood films, and then I end up watching a movie because I was like, wow, that's so interesting. Let me watch this film. And it was a black and white film, and it was a really good film. And then at the end of the movie, the protagonist is in blackface, and I was like, I just didn't need that today. I just didn't need it. But what you said, Anissa, about films being remade so long after, from an actor's perspective, I actually think that can be a really good thing for people, because they're remaking Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Did you know about that film? Did you know? Do you remember it?
That, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I watched Shark Boy and Lava Girl as a child. They're remaking the film. No, they're doing a sequel to the original film. 20 years later, with the same woman who was the girl in the original. Taylor Lautner's not taken up his role of Shark Boy, but whatever. But I think because we know who Taylor Lautner is, Taylor Lautner, he had a big career, he had a life-changing role in Twilight, and he's gone on to do other movies and things like that. For the other girl, if you've had a gap in your career and you're in a position where you can be re-entered into the entertainment industry for a role that you had when you were 10, I think that's a brilliant opportunity. Sometimes that can then offset the career that you were trying to have all of these years in between. So I'm not completely mad when they wait a really long time, because I just think sometimes it offers someone an opportunity that they may not have had otherwise.
I'll give you that. I do agree. It's like how they're bringing the Proud Family back on Disney Plus, and it's giving a lot of the old cast their jobs back. So I 100% agree.
They're bringing it back? Like,
yeah.
new episodes and stuff?
Yeah, brand new episodes, and Kiki Palmer is signed on as a brand new character as well, so they're giving it a lot of egg. So yeah, so
they need to retract some of their problematic colorism as well, but we'll talk about that in another episode.
I think that's a really tough point, because I agree with you. Like, I've watched things, and in the past, I think the lines around consent are so damn blurry. It's unbelievable. I don't want you, blah blah blah. Next thing you know, he's on top of her on the bed. I'm like, this is just
and it's supposed to be
basically
a romantic scene, and it's romantic, and I'm like,
it's basically assault. But I think a lot of the time we have to really suspend that part of our brain in order to kind of take the good from it, because I've tried to look at them more like on the comment in society, because I think definitely in the entertainment industry, especially in film, you can see what was accepted at the time, or what people thought was the norm or should be accepted, and because otherwise we're going to just throw out some real classics out there.
Okay, but the thing is that what I have learned is that, because we always have this mindset of like, oh, but then they thought this and blah blah blah, and whilst it's true, what I have learned is that there are people who think the way that we think now all the way through society. So some of the ideas that we have that we think are original and they're so modern and they're so innovative, there've actually been people who have been thinking them for hundreds of years. They just haven't been at the forefront of society. So we can learn about the way that things were for the most part, but I just don't think we need to consume. I guess it's a personal choice. If you want to consume media that makes you uncomfortable, then cool.
Yes. So whether you prefer originals, sequels, prequels, threequels, hopefully we've inspired you to go watch some of your favourite movies. So thank you so much for watching another episode of Ethnically Speaking. Let's keep the conversation going. Do you think sequels or threequels are better than the original? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want even more of us, be sure to click the link in the description below, where you can get access to Extra Ethnic, which is a special segment that's available exclusively only for our email subscribers. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. For a summary of everything we've discussed today, head over to unitedmelaningroup.com/ES027. There's a link for the description in that below as well. We'll see you the same time next week. Wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. Stay safe.